Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ritika Mandal, and I'm a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies, I extend a warm welcome to all to today's special lecture titled Xi-Trump Meeting in Beijing, Thucydides Summit. Today's lecture examines President Trump's first state visit to the People's Republic of China during his second term, the first such visit by a US president in 9 years. Western media have described the trip as lasting either 2 days or 40 hours, but more consequential than its duration is the question of what it actually achieved. Official statements from both Washington and Beijing declared the summit a success, yet each side has interpreted that success rather differently, framing outcomes in ways that suit their own interests. The wide range of conflicting interpretations evokes the ancient parable of the blind man and the elephant, in which each observer walks away with an entirely different understanding of the same reality. Drawing on commentary from both countries and the international press, today's speaker argues that beneath the historic Thucydides optics, the meeting produced little of real substance and could be summed up as a nothing burger. The speaker for today's lecture is Dr. Hemant Adlaka. Dr. Hemant Adlaka is Vice Chairperson and Honorary Fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, Delhi. He is a former professor of Chinese at the Center for Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, JNU, New Delhi. His scholarly work spans political discourse in the PRC as well as modern Chinese literature and culture. He is also a member of the editorial board of China Report. Professor Manoranjan Mohanty, the chair for today's lecture, is an emeritus fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, its founding member and former chairperson. He is a former professor of political science and director of Developing Countries Research Center at the University of Delhi. He has several publications to his credit, including China's Transformation, The Success Story, and The Success Trap, published by Sage in 2018, and Hindi edition, चीन का कायापलट, सफलता की दास्तां और सफलता का फंडा, published by Akar Books in 2026. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the lecture. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Professor Mohanty.
Thank you. We are really delighted that one of India's most prominent China scholars, Hemant Adlaka, is speaker today. He is a prolific analyst on both current affairs as well as important discourse elements going on in China's particularly popular media. So we are really privileged to have Hemant to reflect upon the Trump visit to China. Well, since this is following some earlier lectures also on the same subject, it has some very special questions to deal with. And very provocatively, Hemant has put the topic as the Thucydides Summit. You know, Thucydides, the 5th century Athenian historian, Greek historian of the Peloponnesian War, was referred to by some scholars to talk about this Thucydides track. I don't want to preempt Hemant, but it is about a rising power challenging an established power. In other words, US-China competitive relationship in the present day world. That is a reference point. Now, I have a vantage point, a preoccupation, and a principal question to discuss. My vantage point is that of an Indian intellectual interested in seeing the world evolve as an equitable, sustainable world in conditions of peace. That is my vantage point. Sometimes I call it the Bandung vantage point. In other words, all the anti-colonial forces in the world in the last 100 years have tried to aim at creating this world. Now, from that vantage point, these two powers, when they interact and the specifics that they agree upon or disagree upon, what implications it has from from this vantage point for the world. So my preoccupation is, after Gaza, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, we have had the US-Israel aggression on Iran. And in the war, Iran today has registered very successfully the American-Israeli attack. And the negotiations are going on. So this is one symptom of the kind of tensions we see in the world when attempts to hegemonize, attempts to create spheres of influence lead to tensions and breakdown of peace and outbreak of war. Therefore, from that, from our peace and democracy vantage point, if we're interested in seeing end to this kind of war situation, this kind of, because Taiwan is another plus point possibly. My principal question, with that I will conclude. My principal question is that the Western press and much of the Indian press, analyzing this in terms of just these two powers bargaining process, is that the right way to analyze this, or to bring in, questions for for example, what it means to South Asia, not only just to one country, India. Of course, we are interested in its implications for India, but its implications for South Asia, for East Asia, and for various continents in the world, and because the Western press and much of the Indian press seems to have said that, this summit, for example, is a decisive summit, for the global future in the coming years. Well, if I read Hemant's writings so far, he would question that. But as I have said, this is my vantage point. This is my preoccupation to see the end of wars. And my principal question is, should it be just be seen as a competitive two-country, two powers, two great powers interaction, or in a global perspective, bringing in peace and equity questions, environmental questions, disarmament questions, and wider questions. So I look forward to listening to Hemant. Hemant, please.
Thank you, Professor Mohanty. First of all, and of course, since I belong to ICS, so I should not be thanking ICS for inviting me to speak today. But thanks, of course, to the ICS young team to having put up this event. But having said that, with your permission, as in chair, Professor Mohanty, I'd like to speak a few words, sharing my feelings and also thoughts about you chairing today's lecture, because, and as you have set the tone, by raising 3 points, vintage point and a principal question. I'll come to that later, but I'm feeling nostalgic also, and I'm filled with emotions also, because my journey into China studies began with you among other uh, ICS institution builders and founders nearly 4 decades ago. And you, I don't know if you remember, I had first met you and interacted with you actually in Beijing in 1984, when I was there as a scholarship student along with 5 other Indian students. One was from Delhi University, your student, and you were visiting Beijing, so you had come to see Indian students in Peta. So there we had the first interaction. Formal face-to-face interaction. I had, of course, known about you before that. And then from then onwards, I never looked back. I always was interacting with you and others in the ICS. And I still remember at that time, your book of uh, political philosophy of Mao Zedong, I think that was the kind of a textbook for us. And I'm also appealing to the younger scholars who are attending this discussion today. If you haven't read that book, please read that book. Because one, of course, even today, uh, I very strongly hold on to this opinion, and I'm sure Professor Mohanty will also agree with me that reading Mao Zedong is essential to understand China, even of today. Although China has changed its face a lot in the last 40, 50 years. And I'm also saying this thing because I've seen numerous writings in the Chinese social media and the digital media, both in the run-up to Trump's visit and during when Trump was there and after Trump's visit was over. Numerous articles and commentaries in Chinese analyzing and discussing these events of Trump coming to China from Mao Zedong thought point of view. Especially, they are emphasizing on Mao's very well-known essay and article on know your enemy and know your friend. So the Trump and Trump's visit is being discussed using Mao's essay on who is your enemy, who is your friend, largely because a point is being argued that why is Trump coming to China at this time when he is in the midst of a brutal war against Iran, and when, if you look at the specific actions under Trump 2.0, since 2025 January, in the international arena, whether it is Greenland issue, or whether it is Panama, or whether it is much recently Venezuela and now Iran, there is a very strong group of scholars in China who believes that all these are basically a very concerted, very organized, systematic preparation towards a final showdown with China. Because especially like Venezuela and Iran have had long and very close economic and strategic ties with China. So the scholars in China are also discussing this very seriously. Why is Trump coming to China? And more seriously, Why is China spreading red carpet welcome to a murderer? I mean, these are the words. Then this is the language of them, not mine. That why is the Chinese regime welcoming a murderer? And why 21 gun salute to a murderer? By doing this thing, I mean, what is going to be achieved? Is Trump going to help China to achieve socialism? Or is Xi Jinping going to kind of lead America towards socialism by all these gestures? I mean, these are questions which Chinese scholars are discussing and raising. So, and I'm very happy that Professor Monti set the tone by raising three fundamental points and also the principal question. And he emphasized on why I provocatively titled my today's presentation as Thucydides Summit. Because, as I mentioned, the 4 decades, I was very fortunate. For 4 decades, I've been learning, discussing, growing in the company of Professor Monti and many others in ICS, especially, I mean, Salam, Professor Monti had also put up in one of our group that poster, and Salam had drawn up a caricature of 8 very senior ICS scholars in 2014-15 when ICS was taking tiny steps in its rejuvenated form in 2015, of 8 very senior ICS founding members and scholars. And I'm fortunate that I had a long innings interacting with all 8 of them. But the longest active interaction has been from those 8 also, with Professor Monti and Professor Patricia O'Brien. And the others in that caricature which Salam had drawn up, and we jokingly used to say these are the 8 samurais of ICS. And it was Ambassador Ranganathan, Ambassador Vinod Khanna, Ambassador Kishan Rana, and Professor Monti, Patricia O'Brien, and G.P. Deshpande, Professor Thanchung, and Professor Wang Yishu. These 8 Salam had drawn. Of course, there were others who were not around at that time. Professor Giri Deshinkar, Meera Sinha Bhattacharya, and etc. So this is the tradition, and this is the learning from where I have come from and I have grown up. And that is what led me to critically look at this event. And I'll explain a little later why I decided to title it with Thucydides Thucydides Summit. And I think when I submitted this title in abstract, at that time I did not know that Professor Monti will be in the chair today. So, and of course, I think he caught the right spirit behind that title. And I don't have to really work hard to answer that question, because that is the tradition I have grown up with all of these ICS senior scholars all these years. Now, Thucydides Summit title was chosen by me precisely because on the basis of the debate and discussion and criticism of the ruling regime in China, of trying to find out some way by which there is peaceful cooperation between China and the US. Of course, nowadays, for political and ideological reasons, the present ruling regime of CPC does not dare officially use the term peaceful coexistence with America. But when they say peaceful cooperation, they actually are meaning peaceful coexistence. And Thucydides, and this has become a very hot topic in the international press or Indian press, as Professor Monti rightly pointed out, as if it's two powers trying to come to some understanding of how to together um, run this world, if one can put it that way. But actually, Xi Jinping mentioning this term, which was first used in 2013 when Xi Jinping went to America first time by Obama, not exactly Obama, but Professor Ellison, who had written that book at that time, and this phrase had become very popular at that time. So, in his speech in Seattle before reaching Washington, Xi Jinping had indirectly replying to Obama, had said that we don't know what is Thucydides trap. In China, we don't know what is it. And we don't think that it's a good thinking. So America should also not think in these terms. That was the first reaction of Xi Jinping to Thucydides trap. And then subsequently, it has become a favorite or frequently used expression by Xi Jinping over the past 10 years or so. And this time, he in fact took the initiative in mentioning this phrase to the visiting US president in his very first meeting. And those of you who had access to or who listened to the word by word remarks of Xi Jinping to Trump and Trump's remarks to Xi Jinping on 14th May live would perhaps capture the uh, issue much better than having read it in the newspapers the next day. And I happened to listen to live each and every word of both sides. And there was one more thing which Xi Jinping had said at that time, which was not given much press coverage. And Xi Jinping had said to Trump that development in one country, of the two countries he was talking about, China and America, Xi Jinping had said, development in one is opportunity for the other. But the media decided to put more attention to another expression or kind of slogan which Xi Jinping had used of the constructive, strategic, and stable relationship between the US and China. I'll come to that also later. So what I'm trying to say is all these and Thucydides trap, in fact, there's nothing new in what Xi Jinping said. And in fact, one Chinese commentator who was very critical of official Chinese welcome and also the statements given out, criticized, by, of course, not naming Xi Jinping, but criticized indirectly that why Xi Jinping is not coming out with something new. Why is being repetitive? And so all these things can be easily seen, can be put in a perspective. And that perspective is that why is, despite all that has been happening under Trump administration to China and to the countries of the global south, many of these countries are very strong allies of China. You all must have read also, there has been a lot of debate and writings on why China is not actively standing up to the US. Even this question has been debated in China also. So, this is the very large, expanded background to understand why Thucydides Summit and why did Xi Jinping use this against a completely silent Trump, and also why Trump was silent. Of course, I don't want to repeat much of what I have already written in 3 or 4 articles on back-to-back 2 visits of Trump in last 1 month or 2 months. 2 visits means the first visit was almost happening, but then postponed, so it did not happen in March end, and the second visit. But Chinese scholars have also pointed out that if you look at since the Busan summit in South Korea between Trump and Xi Jinping, since then, Trump has not used any politically incorrect phrase or words or harsh words against China or Xi Jinping in particular. So, why is that? So that also goes into why Xi Jinping also, or the Chinese authorities also, on their part, have gone almost out of their way to give this grand welcome to Trump. And of course, I wanted to begin with a different beginning, but since I decided to start with where Professor Mohanty left his question, I was going to begin by this thing that where I ended in my abstract, that the overall summing up of Trump's visit was that this visit is a nothing burger. Basically, Trump's visit will be soon forgotten, if it is not already forgotten, because nothing came out of that, at least on the surface. But still, the media, international media, and also the Chinese mainstream media called it a historic visit. I mean, the historic visit is actually just for 2 reasons. One, of course, it has created a historical record that this is the first visit by a US president to China in 9 years. And incidentally or coincidentally, this is Trump's first visit in 9 years also. So last visit was in November 2017. And then Biden, of course, did not visit China. But if you ask me, I will say that it is a historic visit because this visit took place at a time when the bipartisan consensus, anti-China bipartisan consensus in America has been broken. And this particular aspect has not been given due attention in the international press as well as the Indian press. And Professor Monti also mentioned about international press and Indian press focusing more on two powers or heads of state of two major powers meeting and what will it bring to the global economy or the international order, etc., etc. Let me add to that that it's not just the international press and the Indian press, even the mainstream Chinese press also joined the bandwagon in this. And that is why Thucydides trap or G2 or two major power relationship, they're all 3 in 1 actually. And why is it so? I think that is important, very important for us to understand. And that is also related to the other question that despite the genocide in Gaza and the abduction of Mudro and the brutal killing of school children and assassination of leaders in Iran, why the Chinese regime is still very insistent and persistent on striking some kind of a win-win cooperation with America. So coming back to the historic visit, the mainstream media says it is historic because it is first time in 9 years. And the second reason why it is historic is perhaps because last time when Trump returned from China in 2017, he returned from China with the number of deals signed was worth $250 billion. This time when he went back in his kitty, he carried back, at least on paper, $350 billion. So it is historic in that sense also. So it is good for both China and America. Now, it is because of this reason, let me share with you a joke also, which is very popular in China on the social media. That if those of you who remember having heard live the opening remarks of Xi Jinping and Trump to each other on 14th May, and compare the content and the substance of the remarks of both sides. Xi Jinping was talking more about how good it will be for both China and the people of China and the people of the world and for the international order if there is de-escalation of hostility and rivalry between China and the US, etc., etc. And what was Trump talking about? Trump was talking about almost in first person, and he was talking about that how he has brought with him China, America's top 30 business representatives, who are the world's top business people. And then the joke is that $350 billion in his kitty, and when he was being taken around in Zhongnanhai next day by Xi Jinping, and there were some visuals showing very intense conversation between the two leaders. And the joke is that Trump was actually asking Xi Jinping that what is the market value in the real estate of Zhongnanhai? Why? Because some media has actually called Xi Jinping, that Trump, sorry, that MAGA is all politicking. It's Trump first, America second. So that is what represents Trump. Anyway, now to come to the Akshat, can you please show the slide?
You have slides.
Yeah, one slide only.
Oh.
I on second thoughts and last minute, I decided to bring this slide and talk about it a little bit because this is currently now becoming very controversial in the media and diplomatic circles. Mainly because, as I read the reports, it says that it shows the leader of the US in a very bad light and very humiliating for Trump, etc., etc. Now, the interesting thing is that it is all over media and social media in China. And it appeared while Trump was still there in Beijing.
Oh, I see.
But nobody knows the original source and the name of the cartoonist. That's a mystery. So that is also now, there are a lot of speculations that who is behind this. Okay, I think if everybody has had a good look, maybe we can remove it because this balloon is really distracting.
Okay.
So just 2 minutes about this cartoon. And because I also was approached here by some people in the media and otherwise also, trying to find out from me if I knew what is the source of this cartoon. So I did some digging and some exploring. So, of course, I don't have any references to substantiate to claim that. Of course, this is very unusual and rare. And China is not known for coming out of political caricaturing of a visiting foreign leader, especially when a foreign leader is still in China. So the fact that it has happened, and not only it has happened, the foreign visiting leader has been mocked. And the mocking is done by the Chinese top leader. So this also is rare. So in China, these kind of rare things cannot happen without clearance from the topmost level. So this cartoon has got clearance from the CPC. And after the clearance, it was released on the social media Weibo by the China Cyber Space Authority and the Chinese Propaganda Department. And there is a huge symbolism here. Otherwise, it was impossible to imagine that something of this sort can actually happen, because some friends actually told me also that this doesn't look like at all a caricature appearing in Global Times or China Daily or something. So this is about this ballooning of Trump. And naturally, when Trump is around, some fun, some entertainment, some interesting caricaturing cannot be far away. So this cartoon also captures, in a way, the reactions on the visit, post-visit reactions after the visit is over, especially in China. That before the visit, especially when the first schedule of the visit was announced of March end, at that time, the discussion in China was that there was a feeling in the US, especially in the White House, that with victories in Venezuela and Iran, Trump will have an upper hand and will be able to leverage and pressurize Xi Jinping and get his way. That means he will be coming to China as a conqueror. But then that did not happen. I mean, as they say, man proposes, God disposes. So things went out of control in Iran, and Trump was stuck in a quagmire. And that is why he postponed his visit. And the interesting thing is that the postponing of the first visit was neither consulted nor intimated to the Chinese authorities. Like the rest of the world, the Chinese authorities or the authorities in Beijing also learnt about the rescheduling of the visit through media. Trump mentioned it in his social media post, but officially it was it was revealed in an interview which Trump gave to the Financial Times on March 16th. And then White House gave a statement that yes, since the war is going on, so it's better that president is here and not traveling. So by the time Trump finally landed in China, now the question is, why did he come? If he had lost that spirit of a conqueror, because when he landed in Beijing by that time, because of the situation in Iran and the complete seizure and the blockade of Strait of Hormuz by Iran, Trump had lost all the cards. And in fact, all the cards were now with Xi Jinping. So why did Trump come? That's a big question. So, which is not being addressed. That is the point I'm trying to make. Because the mainstream press, the international press, the Western media, and the mainstream Chinese media also. I mean, for them, it was an episodic visit. It was just an episode. So no questions were asked, no details were given. Whereas actually, if you look at the intense debates which are happening in China, in these intense debates, the Trump visit and the summit talks with Xi Jinping are being seen in a historical context, are being seen in the backdrop of the world situation today. And of course, there is escalating tension between China and the US. And then the media, the mainstream media also then goes on telling the world that the visit has been successful. I'm successful for what? That's the question. Now, the interesting thing is, I think, Professor Monti, please, if you can indicate me that when shall I wind up?
Take another 10 minutes.
Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that the neoconservative political forces in America plus corporate media in America was opposed to Trump visiting China now. And the not so pro-establishment forces or political school of thought in China was in favor of Trump visiting now. I mean, broadly in China, this also does not get much attention or reporting in the media, especially the English language media outside China. When it comes to Sino-US relations or America, there are three main strands of thoughts among Chinese intelligentsia or Chinese media. One is the pro-Beijing, pro-establishment view, which emphasize, I mean, you can understand by the kind of language they use. Anyone in Beijing talking about peaceful cooperation is the pro-Beijing, pro-establishment view. And the second view is pro-America, pro-West, pro-liberal, pro-free market view, which largely emphasizes on win-win situation and avoid confrontation and again expansion of Sino-US bilateral relations. And in this, there are a lot of scholars and IR analysts, especially the Tsinghua University Institute of International Relations and some others. And a very well-known media face who had perhaps appeared in India also on some TV channels, Victor Kao and Chang Weiwei, etc. And the third school of thought, which opposes the first two, and which is, one can say that, anti-establishment view, and which is largely first two schools of thought scholars are very much in the ruling circles also, both in the government and in the party. And the third one is outside the party, for sure. And it is the third one which is actually carrying out this debate. So, so it's very interesting that the third group of scholars in China and the corporate media and the neocons in America, they agree on this point that Trump should not have been visiting China now for different reasons, of course. The Chinese scholars who are opposed to Trump visit, they are saying, using Mao's who is your enemy, who is your friend argument, that there cannot be any peaceful coexistence or peaceful cooperation with America. Their reasons are ideological and political. And the corporate media and the neocons in America, they're also saying that this particular trip of Trump was meant, or the objective of the trip was to find some kind of a compromise or buy peace for the timing, for some stability, or to further extend the temporary truce which was achieved in Busan in South Korea, and which is not acceptable to them. Same thing with Democratic Party. When I mentioned that the bipartisan consensus has been broken in China, in America, the anti-China bipartisan consensus has been broken. That does not mean that Democratic Party has become pro-China. Or that also does not mean that the Republicans have become pro-China. The only difference is the Democrats are critical of this visit because they are saying that by this visit or even by attacking Iran, Trump administration has weakened the preparation of taking on China ultimately. So it's a kind of convergence of opinion by default by those in China who are against this visit and by those in America who are against this visit. So in fact, there are, of course, a lot of jokes going around in China also on social media. One joke was that was before Trump came, and I had written about it also, that in 2017, when Trump had visited China, he was absolutely thrilled and fascinated by the kind of reception he received. And he couldn't believe that why China or Xi Jinping, they were so nice to him in 2017. So when he went back, for a long time, he kept contemplating and exploring what was the reason. Then one final day he realized, and he told himself, now I know why the Chinese and Xi Jinping were nice to me. Why? Because he said, because they were afraid of me. And in this trip, a total reversal happened. This is a joke very popular on Chinese social media at present. And this was also the reason why Trump basically kept mum and did not say much. So he did not say anything about China, anything about Xi Jinping. He only talked about business. And he got some business. And in fact, some Chinese anti-establishment view scholars wrote a couple of articles also saying that that how the pro-Beijing scholars or pro-America scholars in China, they are going to miss Trump after 2028. But despite Trump being whatever Trump is, at least Trump does not talk about China's human rights. Trump does not talk about China's individual freedom curbs. Trump does not talk about democracy. On all these fronts, China has a free hand vis-a-vis America. And he only talks business. And now there is also talk of, during this trip, I don't know whether it will actually be announced before Xi Jinping's visit to America in September. But there is a very serious discussion going on between the concerned ministries and officials of both sides to allow China to set up factories in America. And another joke which is going around is, especially related to Trump bringing the 30 top business people from America and at least on paper signing 350 billion worth deals. The joke is that happened because these are the people who are going to fund his midterm election. So I don't know, there's a lot to say about these issues, and half an hour, 40 minutes is a very, very short time. I've tried to put it in a perspective, and I've avoided details, which specific points, if somebody raises during question and answer session, I'll try to do justice to some of the points. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Hemant. One got a sense of the people's views from the social media and the kind of issues being raised at that level, and then you relate them to the larger issues. Thank you very much. Now, I will, because, according to the format of the lecture that given to me, now I will ask you some questions. We have apparently some interaction time.
Yes, of course.
First, let me play not exactly the devil's advocate, those who take it as a very, very genuinely historic visit in the true sense of the term. Not exactly their view. I mean, even comparing with Nixon visit, some people have said that, because that opened up opportunities for America to start a new phase and opportunities for China to start its reforms in a different world environment. As prepare for its new role. I'm not going that far, comparing it with that kind of landmark. But on three issues, there may have been some significant shift of US position by Trump during this visit, with a lot of consequences. One on Taiwan. Apparently, China has got some assurance from, we don't know, but there is speculation that China has got some assurance that we don't know whether Trump will clear the arms deal and so on. He might. But despite that, the assurance may be that Trump will not give too much leeway to the pro-independence forces. The Democratic Party in power in Taiwan and so on. That is one. I mean, it doesn't mean that Trump will not. Trump has promised not to interfere. So he mentioned that I'm not going to fight a war 9,500 miles away. He said that. But it doesn't mean that if China attempts a coercive integration, by using military force, US will not respond. Or I'm not going that far, but there seems to be some compromise, some understanding in Taiwan. That's one issue. What is your view? Number two, China has got a big reprieve or big concession from Trump on the tariffs and on the critical minerals. As a result, on the export of chips technology, I mean, that is, China will supply critical minerals in exchange for advanced technology from US. I know both will exercise a lot of qualifications to that, but you know, don't take the 350 billion US dollar figure that seriously, but the areas, the critical areas in which, you know, the two AI superpowers in the world today have interest, and they may have agreed on a framework. What do you think? Is that not a significant achievement? The third is the global strategic environment. You have, in a way, ridiculed the G20, G2, G2 approach, and I like that. But notice two things. One, Xi Jinping's statement that US-China relations are the most important relations in 21st century world today. In other words, he went only this far. And on the other hand, while coming back, Trump in his interaction with the press said that, I said that, well, no, we have responsibility to, you know, address major questions in the world, meaning two of us will run the world, to which apparently she didn't respond. Because I, you know, in Obama period, he had announced the principles governing major power diplomacy. Now, major power diplomacy framework is a departure from the UN framework. So UN has its Security Council and veto wielding powers and so on. Major power diplomacy is there in UN. But major power diplomacy as an alternative to multilateralism, this is new, and China does go one extent, and that is the framework of the multipolar world in which this major power diplomacy works. And then a few days later, she receives Putin, and the world talks about three powers now. China, Russia, and US. And China, Russia, you know, they have a very close relationship, and they declare in their new statement that, you know, this multipolar world is a new feature of the contemporary world situation, international relations. In other words,
it's 16 hours.
The new relationship now, which crystallized during Trump's visit, and Xi Jinping and China, of course, sees Trump in the balloon, but Xi Jinping officially, at least, admits that now there is an American recognition of China's emergence as a, you know, they don't use the term superpower, but as a great power. Therefore, is it not a stamping of recognition of the new reality in the world where China is recognized by the US as a dominant power, dominant global power. And for reasons that you have mentioned, for trade reasons, particularly for Trump, and strategic reasons to manage a ceasefire and some kind of a exit strategy in Iran, Trump needs China's help. Therefore, for global strategy, that was my third question. For global strategy, this is also an important trend. So on all these three things, what do you think? Is not the trip very important?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Mohanty. I think you have not only summed up the discussion so far, but you've also raised these points to carry forward the discussion. I think partly I have tried to reply to all the three questions in my presentation. I'll explain how. Of course, Taiwan thing was not touched much because whatever has transpired between the two leaders, either on Iran or on Taiwan, since we have not seen that either being officially revealed or as part of the readouts which were issued in Washington and Beijing after the visit. So I think it does not have much significance of whatever has been the understanding between the two leaders behind the closed doors on these two issues. If there is something concrete and solid, then it has to come out. If it doesn't come out, then I don't think it carries its significance that much. But on Taiwan, I think I'll sum it up my reply on Taiwan by referring to a lot of Chinese readers who have reacted to some of the commentaries in the readers' columns to the editor. They have said that that was around 1516, and today is 26th.
Your voice is breaking. Yeah.
Okay. So they have said that let's wait and see what Trump says when he goes back. I mean, during his Beijing stay, he did not say anything. Even his statement to the press that I'll talk to the Taiwanese leader, even that has generated strong reactions in Beijing. And he had said that in his Air Force One, he was going back to the Fox News and all that. But that did not go kindly in Beijing. Supposing he this willingness to speak to the Taiwanese president, because no American president has spoken to the Taiwanese president since the normalization of China-US relations in 1979. The only time Trump spoke on telephone to the Taiwanese elected leader was when Trump was president-elect, not yet president in the White House. So the Chinese reaction is implying that if Trump speaks to the Taiwanese president, that means he is going out of his way and is giving recognition to Taiwan. So that is one, and therefore I think a lot of people are saying in China that on Taiwan, let us wait and see what does he say after he goes back. So he has not. Yeah, he's not said anything about. He's keeping it hanging. whether it is the signing of the arms deal, arms sales of 14 billion to Taiwan or whatever. And perhaps he's using it as a bargaining chip. He's still expecting Xi to come around on Iran, perhaps. Who knows? So, and about his statement that I'm not going to fly to 9,500 miles to fight a war for protecting Taiwan. Well, that's just a statement. He has gone to 12,000 miles in Iran, so he can easily go to 9,500 miles if he wants to. But one thing is sure, with most Chinese analysts are saying that the next, if the US China go to war, whenever that is, then the war will be in South China Sea or Taiwan Strait, not on American borders. Because meaning that it will be America which will be waging a war on China, not China waging a war on America. Even if it is Taiwan declaring independence. So, I mean, these are points which are very intensely being discussed and debated in China. Now, about tariffs and all that, again, there is no joint communique, there is no statement, there is no statement on tariffs so far, and there is no statement on Taiwan so far. So, very clear. And his emphasis on Thucydides Summit, or trying to have peaceful cooperation, or trying to emphasize that America must understand China and avoid making strategic miscalculations. All these expressions which Xi Jinping has been using for the last 10 years. They're basically trying to tell America and also tell the Chinese that don't have any expectations that America will turn around or come around. So that is the I think it's very important to understand when Xi Jinping says that we must keep our house in order. That means if we are solid, then outside forces cannot do anything to us. And that is basically to America.
Thank you. I think that's a great answer. Now, there are questions, and I will request.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
So the first question is from Seri Hitkari, ICS HYI Fellow. The question is, many Chinese analysts have pointed to what they call enormous structural risks that the US economy faces, which they link to the rapid growth of market capitalization of the Silicon Valley, Magnificent Seven, tech companies, and the growing realization that the US economy cannot sustain without China's supply lines, demonstrating a silent agreement that decoupling has failed. In light of these arguments, would it be correct to read the lack of a substantial outcome as a structural constraint where interdependencies make compromise at certain levels inevitable? How do you perceive the future direction of bilateral ties and the broader implications globally in this context?
You want to take these two questions first? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Cherry. I think I'm at least on the basis of the Chinese discussions which I look at. One thing is very clear, that whether it is trade or tech or agriculture, etc., these things, at least the Chinese very seriously believe these things, one has to take one step at a time. And if Trump is now open to these ideas in whatever way, then there is no guarantee that this is going to be the US policy towards China or US-China policy after Trump is gone. So what I'm saying is, then take it as it comes. That is the Chinese approach. Because they're not dependent now, as it has been made very clear by the Chinese. It is the other way around, actually. The Chinese are saying that one, it is impossible for America to continue to have, whether it is manufacturing of semiconductors or whether it is R&D, etc., or whether it is AI, to continue to have edge over China in the, let's say, next 10 years or 15 years or something. And where will they find the market? If they don't open up, where will they find the market? In fact, to the earlier question on Taiwan, what Trump said about Taiwan and 9,500 miles away and all that, in fact, Trump also said that it is in Taiwan's best interest to shift Taiwan's semiconductor industry to America. Because nobody is actually going to America to manufacture. So, so bilateral relations, as far as I understand, so far, what Professor Monti earlier also mentioned to Xi Jinping, saying that Sino-US bilateral relation, the most important relationship or diplomatic relationship in the world. This used to be the diplomatic song between China and America, especially in China, on China's relationship with America in the 2 decades, for 2 decades before Obama. And since Obama, Chinese also gradually stopped using this phrase. And in the last few years, especially last 2 years of Trump first administration, and then 4 years of Biden, and then last year, all these 6-7 years, what Chinese have been saying is that the Sino-US bilateral relationship has become the most conflicting relationship in the world. So this sudden turnaround in Xi Jinping's reviving this most important relationship, etc., they are all basically hinting towards trying his best to see to it that as far as managing the relationship with US is concerned, that's gone. Now, what is replacing managing relationship with US or managing competition in cooperation, that is gone now, and it has been now replaced with cooperating wherever there is localized conflict threatening to get out of control. So in future, even this trip, many Chinese scholars have said, is basically Trump had come to Beijing to see to it that the hostility or the escalation of tensions remains under control.
Okay. There are two friends who want to raise questions. One is Nagraj Adbe, and another is Rafael.
So we will be unmuting Rafael, sir.
Sorry, can you unmute?
Can I go ahead? Can I go ahead, Professor Mohanty?
Nagraj, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mohanty. Yeah, Professor Adlaka, my question, I was sort of trying to step back a bit and, if you talk of this broader struggle for hegemony and dominance between China and the US in the slightly longer term, and if one looks at sort of the American control over the dollar is quite important and quite central to the American US hegemony. I mean, in the past, when Britain was the hegemonic power, the pound was so central. Later, now the dollar is. Now, within China, how is that kind of looked at and debated vis-a-vis the Chinese currency, vis-a-vis the Chinese yuan playing a role in Chinese hegemony overall? By which I mean, uh, in terms of that sort of struggle for hegemony, where does the yuan play a role? And to what degree has China's efforts to have trade in yuan succeeded? But also, how are they held back? Because they're also not freeing up the yuan to the best of my understanding. So, what is the current conversation and debate going on within China over the yuan as being important in part of a longer struggle for hegemony? I hope my question is reasonably clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nagraj. Am I audible? Shall I
Yeah.
continue?
Yes, yes.
See, it's very interesting. I mean, the way you have asked this question, and in fact, um, you answered your question. I mean, in the way I have looked at the issue, in the sense that one, there is some debate not only in China but outside China also, that with the so-called discourse, whether it is rhetoric or not, that one can debate. But the so-called discourse, then is it one hegemon going to be replaced by another? That is one. If so, then even Chinese admit that renminbi or yuan or internationalization of RMB, as it is put in the mainstream discourse internationally, that Chinese are very clear that's out of question, because both international trade point of view and the fact that RMB is still not a reserve currency like dollar, and also the total volume of international trade in RMB is insignificant in terms of challenging dollar hegemony. And they don't have any intention or plan to replace the dollar. I mean, I'm talking of far away from now. I mean, not in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I mean, right now, for example, the total international trade is 3% in yuan. And
I see.
some experts, I'm not expert in this area, but some experts have been doing studies and calculations, and they say that even by next, let's say 2035 or 2049, for example, the Chinese RMB or yuan, including whatever was the existing petro yuan, for example, which some say was one of the main reasons which led to Trump attacking Iran. So all that considered, by 2049 also, the RMB share in international trade is not going to be more than, conservative figures are 17 to 20%, and more liberal progressive figures are 30%.
I see.
So that is one. But more importantly, in fact, nobody in China is in favor of aggressively wanting internationalization of RMB, because the dollar hegemony protects RMB. They don't want to displace dollar, and they militarily also don't have that strength. So it will be suicidal for them.
Now, next question is Rapai. Please unmute. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Allaga. Thank you very much.
Yes. Hello, Rapai. Please ask your question. Hello, Mr. Rapai. Oh, acha, he has. Can you unmute him, please? If you can please unmute Mr. Rapai.
Yes, sir, I'm trying to. I think there's some technical issues on that end. So should we move on to like the chat box questions till then?
Okay, is there more
Yeah,
questions?
yes, sir. So this next question is from Riju Banerjee, ICS intern. You compared peaceful cooperation to Khrushchev's peaceful coexistence and mentioned anti-establishment opposition to the sentiment. How much do you think this opposition overlaps with new left groups in China? And do you think this section of the intelligentsia has any substantial effect on party policy or the wider populace?
Okay, if I understood the question correctly, there was a mention of new left group. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a new left group, of course, it's more a creation of the Western media rather than actually having any substantial presence in the Chinese intellectual world. So I don't think it is that significant or that important, both either as part of intellectual discourse or as exercising any influence in the policy making in China. Now, about other intelligentsia, of course, the regime, even if it is Communist Party, one party rule regime, it has always been paying attention to the opinion in the society, to the think tanks, to the intelligentsia, to the scholars' discourse, etc. And as I said throughout my presentation, uh, uh, there is a very, very strong, in fact, some scholars in China say that there is a vertical split, especially among Chinese intelligentsia, on Sino-US relations on the one hand, and on attitudes of Chinese intelligentsia towards America on the other hand. So it does influence the policy making to a great extent. And about peace, in fact, I forgot to mention earlier about peace. Also, there is a very interesting joke on Chinese social media that during their conversation, one-to-one conversation, chit chat between Trump and Xi Jinping, Trump actually told Xi Jinping that you look, I'm a peacemaker, you know, and so I can also help you buy peace. Then Xi Jinping said, okay, but what you have created in the world, from that point of view, if I were to say, what is peace? So peace to me is like a rare earth commodity.
Okay. Is there any more question?
Another question in the chat box is from Nazar Khan. How perceptions of Xi and Trump differ about relative power of China and the US today, and their respective approaches to use of power.
We have only a few minutes left. Yeah. Okay.
See, it's not so much a question of individual leaders' assessment of each other country's strength or power, etc. I think it is known to all in America. One doesn't know whether what Pentagon keeps telling us, the Chinese Navy is now a force to be reckoned with as far as the US Navy is concerned. I mean, how true it is, one doesn't know. Whether it is really true when you look at the ground reality, or whether it is one way of Pentagon trying to increase its share in the budget, defense budget. So that's an open, debatable point. Similarly, in China, of course, the Chinese are very objective about their strengths and weaknesses vis-a-vis the American military capability and power. And that's why Xi Jinping himself has been making these statements repetitively that militarily we cannot even think of competing with America for next 50 years, at least, if not more.
Okay. Hemant, I think one quick question on India, because the Indian media and commentators have generally said that, look, now there is some kind of a detente between the US and China, and because Quad foreign ministers met today, I think only the reference in that communique to the keeping Indo-Pacific open and secure, can be read as having some China dimension. Otherwise, remember, Quad was formed with China in view, principally. So in India, that kind of debate, so Quad has become more focused on critical minerals and maritime cooperation, those things, rather than containment of China. Therefore, if you take the Trump visit, Putin visit, Quad meeting now, and in between the BRICS foreign ministers meeting, coinciding with the Trump visit. I see there are, this will be my question to you, with which we will end. Your answer would be the last one. So should India be worried by this data, or this actually should strengthen the perspective of those who are advocating normalization and and also building up strength, building up India's own economic and security strength on the one hand, and promoting multilateralism. And this is the point with which I had opened the meeting, what now I would call the G77 perspective, the larger democratization of the world political economy perspective, rather than, two superpowers of the Cold War type who are, through their balance of terror or balance of power, trying to manage the world. So from that perspective to a perspective of the G77, where, all aspects of global interaction are democratized as per the original, the charter principles of equality and mutual benefit. So should India be reacting with concern, or should India continue on a very well thought out G77 Global South perspective?
Okay, very quickly, 3 points on one each on three questions you raised. On Quad, I think the Chinese have been very clear from the time when Quad was established. And I had that time written about it also in one of the articles, that in Chinese understanding, Quad is just a paper tiger kind of a slogan-based coming together of these four nations, trying to build up an anti-China front, but it will not succeed because Chinese had called Quad as the Four Beggars Club. So they dismissed this outrightly. India should not be, if India's concern is whether it is actually détente, the Trump's visit this time and the outcome of Trump-Xi Jinping talks, then as I mentioned earlier in my presentation also, whatever I understand on the basis of the Chinese debates and Chinese discourse, that whether long term, in particular long term, there is no possibility of a détente between the US and China. And short term, periodic, episodic such compromises, quote unquote, will keep happening because nobody wants to engage in a warlike situation now, neither America nor China. So in order to avoid situation getting out of hand or escalating to a level of conflict, to avoid that, these kind of so-called détente will keep happening from time to time. And the third point, I'm forgetting, what was the third point you mentioned?
The G77
Yeah,
perspective.
G77, I think China, again, because China's growing stature and strength, national comprehensive strength over the years. And for example, very often they say during Trump visit also, they say that Americans and anybody else who matters, for whom China matters in the world, they should be sincerely asking this question, that why has China grown so fast in the last 30, 40 years? Nobody is debating this question. Because they say that in 1980, when the Sino-US relationship, normal relationship was established, at that time, the Chinese share in the world GDP was 2%, and the American was 25%. And now you look at the situation. So the Chinese multipolar, so-called multipolar outfits or organizations like BRICS or SCO, etc. And if G77 comes or helps them in achieving their strategic goal, fine. But they're not going out of their way to do something to strengthen or consolidate G77.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for an exciting session. Thank you. Yes.
Sir, so I seek your permission to formally bring an end to today's session. Okay.
Yes.
With this, we come to the end of today's special lecture. We thank Dr. Adlaka and Professor Mohanty for giving us their valuable time and sharing their insights with us. We also thank the audience for joining us today. The video of today's lecture shall be available on the ICS YouTube channel. We would like to invite you to the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for 3rd June. The title of the seminar is India-East Asia Partnership in Shaping the Trajectory of New World Order, Opportunities and Challenges. Further information regarding the event can be found on the ICS website. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today.